Hi, I'm Rachel Unsminger, and I did my presentation on binge eating in college athletes. So, what is binge eating? It is a serious eating disorder in which someone frequently consumes unusual large amounts of food and feels they're unable to stop eating. Some symptoms may include feeling out of control, eating when full or not hungry, eating rapidly, or frequently dieting and restricting calories. So, as I was doing my research, I found that binge eating and abuse had some correlation while I was researching. So, there are similarities, including neurochemical profiles and brain structures of substance dependent and binge eating individuals. So, one research article I found had a study that included 379 college students, both male and female. The participants looked at an online survey answering questions between alcohol consumption and eating behaviors. They found that it is well established that students with substance abuse problems are more likely to develop an eating disorder. And I found this to be significant, especially relating to college students, because college students are usually binge drinking. So that could also lead them to have issues with binge eating or other eating disorders. And also, I found that when individual binge eats, research indicated that food in high sugars and fats cause an increase in dopamine, serotonin, opioids, and endorphins, which is similar to the effects of an individual who abuses drugs. So, why are athletes at risk of eating disorders? One reason is socio-cultural factors. Most individuals are exposed to socio or cultural pressures regarding weight and appearance. The prevalence disorder eating can occur in all sports, but it's found that it's most common in lean sports where thin or lean bodies are believed to be provided an advantage to that sport. An example of this would be like wrestling. And also sports relating. Individuals who play sports, there's an extra pressure for performance, meaning they're likely to restrict eating to try to achieve their absolute best performance. And sports can also emphasize appearance or weight in the tight fitting uniforms. An example of this could be like track or field. So, eating disordered in research. One journal looked at the relationship between eating disorder symptoms and exercise. They had 387 female university subjects with different eating disorders. They took a demographic questionnaire including their height, age, weight, and BMI. They also took an exercise dependence survey, leisure time exercise questionnaire, and an eating disorder diagnostic scale. They found that there's evidence to suggest that the dependence on their relationship between exercise behavior can lead to an eating disorder symptoms. This is important, especially in college athletes, because they spend most of their days training and they need to be properly informed and educated on the symptoms and risks of eating disorders. Another experiment I found looked at female and male undergraduate students at the University of Hawaii. They gave them eating disorder questionnaire, a short form health survey, and health status questionnaire. The results showed that 9.21% of men experienced objective binge eating and 4.38 experienced subjective binge eating. Out of their subject pool, 13.93% of women experienced objective binge eating and 15.59% experienced subjective binge eating. So, objective binge eating is when a binge eater consumes an excessive amount of calories, being as much as 5,000 to 1,500 calories in a single episode. Subjective is when a person doesn't eat an extreme amounts of foods during their binge, but instead eat smaller or moderate foods. These individuals who misperceive the amount of food they consume during binge are subjective. They still feel the loss of control, but they're eating less amounts of the food. So then looking at binge eating in college, there's a high risk of binge eating in college students. The college student population found that college students have poor dietary habits. They also experience high stress levels leading to mindless eating. Stress is found to lead to eating disorders. So then one experiment I looked at used a two-step process to look at the relationship between the mindfulness contracts for the poor eating habits of overeating and skipping meals. They found that restricting food can lead to binging afterwards. Then looking at another research journal, they had 78 participants. They were each randomly allocated to a food specific or general intervention. They found that binge eating decreased through the intervention periods. They also found a negative mood led to an increased likelihood of a binge eating episode. On binge eating days, subjects reported 73.9% had food cravings. So days with food cravings had higher likelihood of binging. I then looked into binge eating and mental health. One study looked at the emotional effect on binge eating disorder. This study found that the negative emotion plays a role in the onset and the maintenance of binge eating. These negative emotions usually relate to interpersonal experiences. Also, in this study, they found that binge eating seems to be related to other forms of maladaptive emotional regulation strategies like substance abuse and self harm. The next study I looked at individuals' differences in how people respond to food, as well as mood and emotional, social, and collective influences on what and how much they ate. They looked at the relationship between eating and mental health. The study found that overeating and undereating have a complex effects on contributing to improved feeling or leading to guilt. They found that self-esteem has a strong connection to the binge eating in an unhealthy manner. The negative body image predicts excessive food restriction leading to binge eating. This is important to know because there are steps that can be taken to improve one's self-esteem, and in turn, this can help prevent or limit the restricting, and then binge eating cycles. And this was a graph that showed that low self-esteem can lead to a negative effect, leading to difficulty with emotional regulation, leading to dietary restrictions, eating beliefs, and then and turning to binge eating. And then after all this research, I looked into binge eating and specifically athletes. One research journal did an experiment of 695 athletes with half the subjects women and half men. They completed a questionnaire with questions asking their desired eating patterns, actual height and weight versus ideal weight, and they found that approximately 1/3 of athletes binged or eat large amounts of food in a short period of time. A total of 167 of the participants experienced extreme binging behavior, meaning they ate large amounts of food for 4 or more times a month. In this study, they found that men binged more than women, and 1 out of 10 athletes reported they felt a loss of control when eating, and they could not stop. Another research journal that looked at athletes looked at male bodybuilders. The researchers compared male bodybuilders to men with eating disorders and then also a controlled group. All the men with eating disorders and the control group were all in college, while less than half the bodybuilders were in college. They found that the bodybuilders displayed a binge eating after competitions and long periods of restriction of food. The men with eating disorders all also displayed a poor sense of body image, leading them to feel stressed to then binge. This can lead to the binge eating cycle. So, first, it usually starts with the desire to lose body weight or decrease body fat, leading to restricted dieting, which then leads to feeling hungry and craving, which can lead to them to binge. After the binging episode, it can make them feel out of control and shamed. So then to regain control, they go back through the restricting period again, leading them to feel deprived, and then the cycle can repeat if not anything is done about it. I then sent a survey to men and women of college students who played a sport at their school. And the questions that I asked and that stood out to me the most was, out of all the people that answered, only 14.3% don't know someone that's ever experienced an eating disorder. And also, I thought it was shocking that when they answered the question that if they were offered the proper resources, only 16% said yes, and 50% said maybe, which seems alarming that they're not certain in the resources that were offered. Also, I asked, do you think it's important for colleges to offer education on eating disorders? And almost everyone answered yes. And also 71.4% of people who took the survey think that student athletes are at higher risk of eating disorders. And I also found this to be true through all of my research that I've done in these different research articles, because it seems that people who are put under such pressure to perform or look a certain way are more likely to restrict, which then in turn is leading to the binging. So, steps to take for help. One step is to develop a healthier relationship with food, find better ways to feed their feelings, take back control of cravings, and support themselves with a healthy lifestyle habits. And then treatment and research. One study looked at treatments for binge eating disorder, and they screened 254 patients who had an eating disorder. They gave 126 patients psychological treatment, which included emotional focus treatment. The other patients just got dietary consulting treatment. Then half of the individuals in the emotional focus treatment got dietary counseling treatment. They found that the psychological treatments for binge eating disorder are effective on binging episodes, but they have limited effect on body weight reduction. So they recommend using a combination of the psychopathology with dietary counseling to help improve eating disorders and body weight. So the first steps to take are just overall general steps, but there do need to be more steps taken in order for a person to actually overcome and treat their eating disorder effectively. So, way for colleges to help student athletes. In my survey that I conducted, I asked these athletes ways they would like to see implemented for help with any eating disorders. And they suggested proper education on nutrition and diet and how it's important just beyond getting calories. They also suggested they could hand out pamphlets or have athletes take a required course on nutrition. Lastly, they suggested offer resources and being open when talking about such serious matters such as these eating disorders. Other ways I think they should help is to educate coaches on signs and symptoms that they should look for in their athletes so they can get help early on. Some examples of these symptoms can include exercising to the point of exhaustion, experiencing dizziness, and becoming anxious about missed sessions or disruption to exercise. Making sure to educate the coaches is important, so because they are with the athletes so often, they can pick this up early and they can offer them proper steps to get help to either prevent it from going farther or to help them get better. We also not only should be educating the coaches, but also the athletes on proper nutrition and exercise, and also along with the risks of eating disorders. It seems that people talk about them, but they don't necessarily talk about how crucial they can actually be to one's health. So making sure that athletes and coaches are both educated on this. They also should offer professional help to athletes who show any signs and symptoms of eating disorders. So even if it's just a small thing, to stop it before it gets too bad is very important. And then these are my resources of the research journals. And then here are my other sources. Thank you so much.